Hey, yo, what is going on, you guys? Got a brand new episode of Buy or Bust for you guys today. Today, we're going to be talking about Zombie Galacti. Is this card going to be worth your precious resources? We're going to go over two decks, the pros, the cons, meaning the goods and the bads for this card, as well as the floor and the ceiling, some key synergies and counters. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. So in case you guys did not know, Zombie Galacti is a 7-cost 4-powered card with the ability at the start of the game, choose 6 other cards in your deck. On reveal, transform those cards into copies of this. This is what it looks like in game. This is going to be 6 random cards. You do not get to choose what cards they are. And whenever you do end up playing Zombie Galacti out, whatever Zombie Galacti's power is, that is what those cards are going to transform into. Copies of this Zombie Galacti card with its concurrent power. Kind of like begs the question, how exactly are you going to get the most value out of this? Are you playing lower powered cards? Are you buffing this up? Are you having to ramp this out? How exactly are you going to be playing out Zombie Galacti? Which is why I want to talk about some of the key synergies for this card. First and foremost, we're going to be talking about Pixie. Pixie is a way to be able to get this card out without having to ramp it out. It is shuffling the cost of other cards in your deck in order to make them potentially cheaper. Of course, Mobius helps it. If they're not as cheap as they once were, Mobius makes it so it's back to their original cost. Or it's cards, they can't cost more than what they originally costed. That's kind of like the premise of Mobius, which is kind of like what goes hand in hand with what we're talking about with Pixie here. Next, of course, we're going to talk about Jennifer Kale. Other energy enablers, such as just ramp cards itself, giving those to make it so you can play your Zombie Galacti out on turn 6 without having to do a limbo. But I feel like that's maybe something you want to include in some of your decks as well. Something like a magic, and just in case you do not hit that Pixie, or you do not hit that Jennifer Kale, or Luna, or probably not Electro, or like a Hope Summers, like just in case you don't hit those curves, in order to be able to play out Zombie Galacti if you're really going to be pouring into this card. Another card I'm thinking about is like a Fastos, which could reduce the cost of Zombie Galacti, give it power. Talking about giving cards power, we're also talking about something like a Gwenpool, Galacta, Shuri, Forge, or other cards that can give your Zombie Galacti power. So when it does reveal and your cards do transform into Zombie Galacti, they're at a higher power than that 4-power baseline that they're at. Of course, Surge could be another potential card too, because it would be an energy discount and a power enabler as well. Then looking at the counters for this card, of course, Cosmo would make it so Zombie Galacti does not go off at all, because this is an on-reveal card. In order to transform your other cards, Cosmo, of course, does stop that because it stops all on-reveals. Of course, Korg is another card that could potentially offset your Zombie Galacti combo, because Zombie Galacti is the start of game, and it looks at the cards in your deck. A Korg could offset your shuffle and make it so you don't draw those Zombie Galacti cards. That is going to be a Korg. That is potential Rock Slide, potentially even something like a Terrax. You could even think about cards that take cards away from your deck, something like a Yondu, a Gladiator, even a Cable. Those are also cards that can kind of disrupt what you're trying to do with Zombie Galacti, as well as Shadow King. Shadow King, I believe, will reduce those cards to their base power, meaning that original 7/4. I believe Shadow King will work that way. I could totally be wrong, but that's kind of what I've been theory crafting here, is Shadow King is one of those cards that can kind of offset this. Alioth also, make it so the card doesn't go off at all. Aliothing in a lane, so then the Zombie Galacti doesn't get to do his thing, Another just key counter card there. Looking at the good for this card, though, it transforms cards that I believe are unknown to your opponent. Your opponent does not know what cards are going to transform into these Zombie Galacti cards, so they may not be able to play around that necessarily. If opponents can see what cards can be transformed, I think that's a little bit funky. I think that takes away some of the value of the Zombie Galacti, but I'm inferring that your opponents don't get to know what cards are going to transform. And then that's where it'd be the surprise power. If you've buffed the Zombie Galacti, those transformable cards can actually steal you games. They can win you lanes that your opponents think they've won because you don't have enough power right then and there on the board, even though when Zombie Galacti goes off, you flip that lane on its head. And then I think the animation of the card itself is also really sick. It has one of the coolest animations like I've seen when it comes to some of these new created cards they've added to this game. It is absolutely one of the best starting game animations for sure. Moving on to the bad for this card. It is a 7-cost card, so you will either need to ramp it out, you'll need an extra turn to be able to play it out, or you'll need something like Pixie in order to get value from this card, which is very unfortunate because you kind of have to play the 7-cost card opposed to like a Dormammu. You know, you can just summon it. Something like a Scar gets discounted from cards that have 10 or more power. Then, of course, you have Airishim. Airishim you're normally not playing out unless you just completely brick. So, like, those are some, like, the main ones I'm thinking about when it comes to something like this. You're kind of in a very, like, funky spot. So it'll be interesting to see how the Zombie Galacti performs in that sense. But then, of course, you know, it doesn't hit the same cards every game. It may hit some of those cards you don't want Zombie Galacti to hit. Of course, there's a world where actually hitting some of those cards earlier on, it doesn't matter because when you transform in the end, you already got the usage and the purpose out of them. But there's other cards that'll be hit by Zombie Galacti that it may take away power from, or they were originally at something higher than 4 power, or you want an ongoing ability or something that happened with that on reveal to stay on the board. But instead, you get that card being able to be transformed into a Zombie Galacti, and you're unable to really do the combo you want to do. And it has a pretty low base power, like I said, at that 4 base power, which you're kind of really wanting to buff that up in order to get value, or you're playing something with low power in order to get that buff anyways, turning it into a 4-powered card opposed to something a little bit lower. Talking about the floor and the ceiling for this card, on the low end, you're unable to ramp this out. You don't have any extra energy to play this, or it hits, like I said, all the wrong cards. So it's a 4-powered card that you're transforming your other cards into 4-powered cards, or you legit don't get to play this card at all, and your whole game plan was to buff up this card. So that would be a really feels bad. That's the other thing is the floor for this card. I think the middle line, probably on average, you're able to play out like 1 to 2 cards that can be transformed into cards that, you know, the Zombie Galacti can do with its on reveal. Of course, you do have to kind of ramp that out or have the extra turns in order that happen, but I'd say at least 1 to 2 of those created cards of the 6 that you've generated with the Zombie Galacti will get value. Now, I think the best case scenario is that you have Zombie Galacti played out on curve, I say, meaning ramped out, or you've had this card hit with a Pixie, or you have Limbo. So you have Zombie Galacti in order to play this out, and you have 3 or more created cards on the board, and your Zombie Galacti has been buffed. So whatever concurrent power Zombie Galacti is at, when the on reveal happens, that's what all the cards around him get transformed into, is the concurrent power of Zombie Galacti. So that would be like the absolute peak, the pinnacle ceiling for this card. Moving on over to the first deck we have over here is Zombie Pixies. We're really just pouring into the zombie list, having some cheaper cards that can be swapped around with the Pixies. We also have a Jennifer Kale in order to potentially have extra energy for that turn that turn 6 play to be able to play that Zombie Galacti out. It can be buffed by Fastos. It can be buffed by Galacta. It could be buffed by potentially Nico, but it only gets the buff after it procs the unreveal. So maybe not the best case scenario there, but you also have just some lower powered cards. Whether that is that Nico, whether it is Pixie, Zombie Galacti, or not Zombie Galacti, Zombie Mr. Fantastic, Jennifer Kale, Mobius. If you're playing this towards the end of the game, you don't really care about that Mobius being turned into something else from that 3 power. So like you do get some value there. And Galacta, of course, makes that happen on the Zombie Galacti before it procs. So it would be a 6-powered Zombie Galacti on reveal opposed to a 4-power Zombie Galacti on reveal is kind of the thought process there. Or you're pouring just more into the zombie kind of horde style list. You do have Zombie Scarlet Witch. You do have Zombie Giant Man. So you do have options here. Even like Kitty Pryde, you're not necessarily going to be getting the max Kitty Pryde every single turn. So Kitty Pryde going from a 1-3, 1-4-ish to potentially a 7-6. Can't get hit by Killmonger. Could be pretty cool. So that's kind of like the general premise here is a lot of these cards that can be transformed into Zombie Galacti, you know, cards itself get a lot of actual value, and they've already used their abilities to give you some of that as well. Next, of course, we're going to have a Wiccan kind of Zombie Galacti list, which is also kind of interesting. We, of course, have Quicksilver Domino, which could get value from being turned into Zombie Galacti. You have Esme in order to potentially get a Zombie Galacti from your deck, or some of these other more expensive cards and get value. I know they're going to be a 3-4, but there's ways to potentially buff those cards, or you ramp out something early in case you maybe don't draw it later. You, of course, have Fastos to buff the cards in your deck. You have Copycat to, you know, get the copy of text of your opponent's deck or a card on the bottom of their deck so you can kind of maybe understand what your opponent's playing. You have Silver Surfer for steps to be able to either copy your Gwenpool or be able to copy your Wiccan, potentially even a Fastos, in order to get the most value possible in this list is what I'm thinking there. Of course, you have Wiccan. If you do play Wiccan, you'll have 8 energy on turn 6, so you can play Zombie Galacti out. So not a bad shout there. And then, of course, you have Cosmic Ghost Rider to offset your opponent's tech, or just other cards they have for their own combo pieces on the board too, and Eliath to be able to do that as well. Turn off opponent's plays is also very nice. But that's kind of the gist of the deck. So I'm going to make 2 decks this week for Zombie Galacti. But this card's going to be pretty interesting, which is why I want to say, you know, it has potential to be strong. I don't necessarily think it is the strongest card. That's why I kind of gave it a 3-star. Flexibility-wise, you kind of really have to like build around this and find ways to buff this in order to get the most value for this card. So I don't think it is necessarily the most flexible card. That's why it has a 1-star there. And adjusted, if this card does perform utterly bad or just not good, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe it goes to a 7-5. Maybe crazy, a 7-6. Because of the way the ability works, they want something that's really cool. They want a really cool ability in the game. I wouldn't be surprised if they, you know, change this card and make it a bit better because they want more people to buy it, and they spent all this time making this really cool ability and making this really cool animation. But I would say this card is a bust. I think unless you really enjoy the style of play or really wanted to pour into this, I would skip this card. I would kind of save your resources. The spider season is right upon us, and those cards look crazy, and most of them look like they're going to be really, really strong. So I would probably save my resources for that, but unless you really want to enjoy and play that style of deck, you want to play the Zombie Galacti, go for it. And I think it's your resources. You should feel like you can spend them the way you want to, because at the end of the day, we're playing a video game, guys. We are playing a video game. This is a game that we're supposed to, you know, have fun with and really enjoy. So, like, the bottom line is have fun with the game. Buy what you want to buy. It's your resources. You know, they are precious. We don't have a large abundance of them. But if you want to get Zombie Galacti, do it. If you don't want to get Zombie Galacti, you don't want to get any of the spider cards, you just want to wait till the Weapon X season, you know, totally feel free to do that. It's your resources. You can spend them the way you want to. At the end of the day, me and my other fellow content creators are just theory crafting with these cards. We haven't really had hands-on testing to be able to like truly see what is the best way to do this. You know, we're just kind of theory crafting, you know, like this is our general idea. These are the decks we think they could perform like this, but who knows what's going to happen. I mean, we're supposed to, I believe, have like an OTA this next week, if I'm not mistaken, or we just have just a bunch of crazy stuff in the works. You know, the meta can totally shift this next week or the following week. I think if I actually look at this, the OTA, if you check my Discord, which my Discord is down in the description below, which I do actually keep track of all of the news that Marvel Snap does post. We do have an OTA on the 30th, so just keep in mind, the meta could shift. They could buff cards. They could nerf cards. You know, good cards get nerfed and buffed. Bad cards get nerfed and buffed. With the news, you know, with packs and everything too, they have the opportunity to really do whatever they please because people have more access to these cards, even though we're getting a surplus of cards every single season. So just kind of keep that in mind. We do have an OTA on Thursday. We also have Grand Arena this next week. The meta could also be completely weird because more people are doing Grand Arena than Ladder or Conquest and stuff. So maybe they're doing more Grand Arena stuff. So you're maybe not getting the most Zombie Galacti fullness, or they may be testing in Grand Arena. I probably wouldn't test it in Grand Arena, but at the end of the day, cards don't always work out the way we think they're going to work out. We're theory crafting, but at the same time, buy the cards you want to buy. You know, we're playing a video game. We're just here to have fun, and this is a way to, you know, keep our mind at ease. Or if you want to sweat, you sweat. You know, you want to be super competitive, you want to be super competitive. You want to be super casual, be super casual. At the end of the day, we're just here, and this is still the best community. I love the Marvel Snap community, and I love you guys. Thank you guys so much for all the love and support. I really appreciate it. If you guys did stick around to the very end of the video, let me know down below. What are your guys' thoughts on Zombie Galacti? What are your thoughts going forward on the Spider-Verse new season? I think I'm going to try and do actually a full comprehensive guide on the Spider-Verse season. Like, do it from card 1 all the way to the last card. Let me know down below if also that's something you guys would be interested to. And definitely feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. It's been real. God bless, and Tucker out.